Hello and welcome to Sacred Psychology, the podcast for misfits and mystics. Here, neuroscience and spirituality go hand in hand. Join me, Tamara Powell, on a no-holds-barred adventure outside the box, because that's where all the truly great shit happens anyway. Welcome back to Sacred Psychology. I'm your host, Tamara Powell. Today's episode is all about exploring how do we process negative experiences? How in the hell does one make sense of the fact that bad things happen to good people? Well, my guest today is Laura Reagan. She's an integrative trauma therapist and owner of a trauma-informed group practice outside of Baltimore, Maryland. Laura uses mindfulness, somatic methods, expressive arts, and the daring way to help people process and heal trauma related to painful childhood experiences. She is also the host of Therapy Chat Podcast. You can find Therapy Chat at therapychatpodcast.com. So without further ado, I give you my interview with Laura Reagan. Hey, Laura.
Hey.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation, which is interesting to say. Like the second I say that, I'm like, wow, the topic we're diving into is not all that lighthearted, and yet I'm still very excited about it.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's those conversations that you don't get to have with people, that you wish you could have, even though they're intense and deep.
Those are my favorite. And maybe that comes with our career field as being therapists, but I don't like the shallows anymore.
No, me either. I really have I can't really be comfortable in just ignoring what's really happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, do we all see what's happening, right? Why are we talking about the weather?
Exactly. So let's dive into this whole existential quandary of, bad things happening across the globe, and especially to people that it's just unfathomable because we look at them as being so good, so good-natured. Why do bad things happen to good people? That's been a perennial question, hasn't it?
Definitely, yeah. And, no matter when this is released, it'll be timely that something recently has happened that we're all saying, how could that happen? It's so unfair. It's so painful to see people suffering. And of course, that's the nature of life, that there's always something happening, that someone's hurting. And, now that we have a 24/7 news cycle and the internet, we see it, but it's always been happening.
And I have such a love-hate relationship with social media for that very reason sometimes. How about you?
Yeah, I want to be aware and connected, and sometimes knowing what's really happening can be overwhelming, but it's also helpful for me at least, to just remember that is happening, but right now I'm okay,
Right. No, absolutely. And I think everyone has to find their own happy medium with it. And so for me, it has been really teaching the Facebook gods, what I want in my newsfeed and what I don't, and where I want it from, and just being very careful about my news sources and how it's being shared. And it's not that I want to turn a blind eye to it, but I don't want certain purposefully, emotionally incendiary pics and posts coming across my newsfeed.
Definitely. Sometimes we can be bombarded with images before we have a chance to even know what they are.
Right.
And it can be horrifying to see, like graphic photos or videos of people killed or like not other physical violence, war and things like that.
Yeah, and it's very assaultive.
Yeah, and it can be very destructive to us, I think, when we're taking that in, when we haven't had a chance to pause and say, okay, what am I ready for right now?
Right. And what's my reaction going to be and how do I take it in? So you're a therapist, like I'm a therapist, and I'm sure this has come across your client schedule where people come in and they just don't know what to do either with their own trauma or with the secondary, tertiary, all the traumas from even their news feed. It can get very confusing and muddy at times.
Absolutely. And, I think there's like a parallel conversation in what we're talking about because, yes, clients come in who are feeling inundated and assaulted and bombarded with bad news and horror that is activating their own trauma or reactivating it. And then there's us as therapists and what we hear in our sessions all day. And for me, I work with people who have complex trauma. So that's what I hear about all day, the ways that people hurt each other. And so I had a bit of an existential crisis myself. I think this was in about early 2011 when I started to have this nagging question of why? Why do these things happen? Why do people hurt each other? And also things like not just people deliberately harming each other, but why do things happen? Like, why do babies get cancer? Why?
Right.
I can't really sit with the idea that, it's for them to learn something. Like, what's a baby going to learn by having cancer?
Girl, I mean, maybe. Right with you. Yeah.
It's like there are some things that's just like, well, I just can't see what the message is in that. And I know that sometimes people say everything happens for a reason. We don't understand why. But the real issue, I think, and this drove me to return to therapy at that time. And I asked, the first therapist I went to, but why? I need to know why. And the therapist they gave me an answer and I was like, but that doesn't really explain it. I mean, I need to know why. And then they just kind of stared at me. And I'm thinking, they don't know why either.
Right. Blankets and Band-Aids and placating just don't work in those moments.
Right. Because what it really is that something was opened up for me that probably was more like questions of, why wasn't I loved the way that I needed to be loved by my parents? Or why did someone I love die? Or things like that. The real reason that this question seemed so important at that time was related to some kind of loss that I had that, I just couldn't make sense of. And, and it's really that has to be tended to.
You're so right. So where did you end up wandering through those layers? What did you come to? Not answer-wise, but I guess what I'm asking is where was the exploration? Where did you find yourself going down a certain rabbit hole?
I think what happened is that first, since I kept asking everyone why and no one knew, no one was giving me an answer that I felt made sense or that satisfied the question, I began to see that this question became exceptionally urgent for me in response to a secondary trauma, a lot of trauma exposure. And I've done trauma work even before I was a clinician. I was doing crisis trauma work. And so I've had a lot of exposure to other people's pain, but there was a particular work that I was doing that was just extremely painful for me to witness what my clients were going through. And that really activated some vicarious trauma in me. And so once I began to realize that this kind of like black hole of needing to know, like this unquenchable thirst for why was really about my own reaction to the trauma I was experiencing vicariously through my work with my clients, then I said, okay, so that's what this is. It's not that it doesn't matter why, but I'm feeling this way because I have some trauma exposure that has activated something for me and I need to take care of it. And then to what you really asked, the way that I got there was, it's funny because I'm looking at something on my wall right now that's from the Trauma Stewardship Institute. And it was when I found the book Trauma Stewardship, it helped me to understand how we as therapists can find our way to remembering that no matter what is happening, there are also other things happening too.
Right.
So, that balance of, a baby's being born and someone is dying and, there's a flower blooming and someone is sad, and it's all happening at once. And it's not just all horrible things.
I love that because it really reminds me personally of the holistic life cycle. It's never just life and then death. It's not just a duality. It's always life, death, life. There's a nature to things. We see it in the lunar cycle. We see it in the way a woman's womb sheds every month. We see it in the oh my goodness, right? Like osmosis and just science, literally like the soul of the universe inhales and then exhales and then inhales again. And I love when we're working with trauma and pain, what I hear you talking about is we go through those layers almost in a what wouldn't make sense to most people. It feels very counterintuitive to go deeper into the pain, the explorations, rather than pulling back from it to get to that sweet, since we're talking about sacred psychology, to that soul essence, that space of being, that it's different, I guess, suppose with the language wise from worldview to worldview, but it's that place of, once again, like light and love and gratitude and pointing us back to the other side.
Yeah, like the life force and that there is something, and that's what happened is that I really began to get serious about having a mindfulness practice that I've said this before. I don't say it. I don't know if I've said it on a podcast before, but there was a time where my worldview was, first it was, I'm not okay and I'm never going to be okay. And then through healing, it became, I'm okay and I'll be okay as long as nothing happens to the people that I love the most.
Dangerous. I know. Oh, that gives me anxiety just hearing. Yeah,
I know. I thought that was good enough for a while, but now I realize it's, where I am and where I am trying to get to is, or I think where we're all trying to get to is the point of I'm okay, even if other people aren't okay, even if the people I love aren't okay, like I will still be okay. Like knowing that you are okay as long as you're alive. And then when your life is ending, then you're still okay.
You're still okay. Yeah.
Right. But that's, that's when you're coming to the end. And it's like, there's no I'll be okay as long as this doesn't happen. It's just like, as long as I'm alive, I'm okay.
That really brings to mind Tara Brach's notion of radical acceptance. Like what you're describing is not just a little bit of trust there. That is some radical freaking surrender.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, one of the things that we as therapists tend to struggle with is trying to control everything.
I mean, I don't know what you're talking about.
Not most therapists. Yeah. No, I mean, thinking that as long as I can control what's happening, I'll be fine. But, we can't control what's happening ever. So letting go of that idea is actually pretty liberating.
It's so freeing, but damn, it's hard.
It is hard. It is hard. And I was thinking about, before we started recording, we talked for a second about entrepreneurship and I was thinking about it even as a business owner, like you go through ups and downs, you're trying to build your business. And as it grows and grows, you're like, well, for me, I was like, okay, now I'm getting there. Like now it's going to go only in positive direction.
Yes.
And it's the same thing we think about our lives. It's like, no, there are going to be good times, and we have to fully celebrate those times and not just skip over them and go, good, now it'll stay like this, but just enjoy it while it's happening, because there will be hard times. And, there's no like end goal.
Right? It is such a cha-cha. It's a spiritual cha-cha, y'all. And that, there's a tweetable. Tag me. It's a spiritual cha-cha.
Hashtag spiritual cha-cha.
Yes. Coming to that place where it really is a both and. You fully celebrate and you fully grieve. You give yourself permission to not be okay while telling yourself you are okay no matter what. I mean, it's a little bit of a mindfuck, but I don't know how else to do it.
Well, I mean, we can try to do it another way, but that is how it is.
Well said. I mean, y'all welcome to try, but Laura Reagan said, this is it. And I do agree. It has to be a both and.
Yeah. So, I mean, the question of why bad things happen still matters to me, but the pain and the urgency is gone from it. It's like, I'll still be curious, but that's a really different feeling from this feeling I had before of, no, everything's not okay because bad things are happening and it's not right and it's not fair. And, I want to do something, but I feel helpless. Like that's a classic feeling of trauma. Yes. and vicarious trauma.
It's what I hear you describing at my soul level is this, we don't get anywhere trying to find answers. I mean, people have been doing this for millennia, billions of years since the earth's been around. What is most empowering and seems to have the, most fulfilling results is the, what do I do with it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? The brain loves filling in the blanks. Like it wants to create meaning and purpose out of everything. That's why I'm a diehard existentialist, probably. It's probably my inner control freak. And I didn't think about that till just this moment, but I'm going to have to journal on that later. Like, whoa, maybe every existentialist is just a control freak. But that aside, it's what I feel in session with other people or even in my own personal life. It's okay, now what do we do with it? We cry, we get messy, and now what?
Yeah.
You think about, 2 breast cancer survivors, and, one, they're both wondering why, they're both grieving, and one goes on to create support groups and advocacy centers or early detections, and the other one slowly withers and dies.
Yeah.
There's a choice in the pain, I think.
Well, I think it's like, even the one may do all this advocacy work and the other may not. But if the one who's not doing advocacy work is saying, well, I accept that this is what my life is, that I've lived this long and I have this illness and the, whatever treatments there are have been exhausted, or I've chosen to, stop with them for my own reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But the radical acceptance piece is, this is what is. And
yes. And as long as she leaves that fully
wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean something went wrong if you didn't live to be 95 because that's what you thought was going to happen. It's what are you making of this life in the time that you have? And not in a like shaming or
not at all
been doing good enough kind of thing at all. But it's really like, it's just that reminder that really this moment is the only thing we have.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we live it fully and experiencing what it is, even if it's feelings that we don't like?
Yeah, it really brings up that existential theory that duality really is a perspective maker. It allows us to appreciate. And I'll never forget, I lost a brother to childhood cancer. He died at 10. He was diagnosed at 5. And now I was 9 years older. So I went through all of my teen years with, shuffling back and forth to Boston from Newport, Rhode Island to visit him in the hospital and cancer treatment. And then we eventually watched him lose that battle. And I remember being so angry and questioning and, crying, and just, I got in my car at church one day, just screaming my lungs out because I didn't know what else to do. Sometimes I think primal scream therapy is totally legit.
Mm-hmm.
But after,
there's something to it. No,
there really is. Release that throat chakra.
Yeah.
But coming to the end of myself, and it's a limitless, it's like trying to comprehend eternity, to comprehend the why. When I came to the end of that rope of going, now what? Now I honor the pain. It felt like I honor him. I honor my pain. I honor all of it by doing exactly what you just said. What are you going to do with this life now, in this moment? If I sit here, it just feels like a loss. And so you're right, not everyone's journey is, and I really was hoping that people wouldn't take it that way, is not to get up. We don't need a dozen, bajillion different people trying to create advocacy centers, but it's what's authentic to you. What is your soul? What is your soul purpose? Your calling in this pain?
Exactly.
So where did you end up wandering back to, Miss Laura, after you went through your quandary?
Well, a lot more of a feeling of connectedness to myself and a perspective to be able, not, it's a practice, but so it's not that I'm unaffected by painful things that happen by any means, but
sure,
more that I can hear something, I can have my feelings about it, and I don't try to push them away, but I have a better sense of perspective, which you mentioned a minute ago, between the horrible things that are happening in the world and what is happening to me right now. I do deeply care about the horrible things that are happening, and yet I'm here now. Actually am not, it didn't happen to me. So I have some space that allows me to say, so how do I want to make a difference? If this is something I deeply care about, then what can I do?
So good.
Yeah, because the person who it happened to they're suffering through what they went through, so they can't do something about it at that time. But if you care, you can,
I love that because it allows for our feelings to be biofeedback. Hello, little directional signals of, hey, this hurts. I'm hurting for this person. Whether, you describe yourself as empathic, or you just wake up one day and find yourself sobbing looking at your social media feed, allowing that to be informing for you of, yeah, wow, I care because I love, I hurt because I love. And so what might I want to do with this? Allowing it to be fuel for you rather than,
making it shut you down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a million options then. It opens up so much creativity.
Yeah. And that's what really, as we know, you can actually change the way your brain reacts through using mindfulness practices. And so if you have a practice of mindfulness, you have many times, maybe not all the time, enough space between what you are finding out about and how you feel about it, that you don't have to just react to it, but that you can be thoughtful and say, okay, what's happening here for me?
Yeah, the pause between stimulus and response, so big.
Yep, exactly.
So hard to stay mindful of. It is a practice. You're so right.
Yeah. And then I think for us as therapists and anybody who is a human being, so anyone who's listening, that if those kinds of questions of why, are really bothering you, or if you do open up your Facebook and you are crying hysterically at what you see on your newsfeed, what's this about? Like, what needs to be tended to?
Get curious.
Yeah, exactly. All these bad things are happening, and they were happening yesterday. They'll be happening tomorrow. So what needs to be taken care of for you if that's causing you to be, unable to be in your own life?
So I'm going to turn the dial up a little bit on those of us in the healing arts, or those who or just by nature are more nurturing or even empathic, intuitive, whatever words we're labeling it. And finding that space to be able to hold space for another human being while not taking it on. Any words of wisdom there?
Well, the best thing I've learned. Okay, so here's my perspective on that. As someone in the healing helping professions. I used to think that you're supposed to turn off your emotions. And that was a very simplistic way of looking at it, but that's what I thought. And I knew how to do that from my great training that I received from my early years. And so turning off your emotions just means that you're still having all these feelings. You just don't know what they are. And so then they jump out and they pop up in the middle of the night and they just pop out of the closet and they're like, boo.
It sure is like whack-a-mole. You can't keep them down.
That's right. You're like, where'd you come from? Oh my gosh, there you are again. But instead, if you can be, and what we must be as therapists is to be grounded in your work. And it doesn't mean that, I'm grounded and so I'm fine. I'm a great therapist because I'm just grounded. No, it's an ongoing, constant practice of checking with yourself and returning to being grounded at all points throughout the day. So when you find yourself in a session, or if you're an intuitive healer or you're an energy worker, or all the different ways that we can work with people, you're feeling something that's overwhelming you, then you have to pause and tend to that so that you can then be there for what that person is feeling.
Yes, I often remind people this is why we have a social worker hour of 45 to 50 minutes, because you want your healing professional to have those 10 minutes to, do some grounding work and releasing work, and beyond just, heading to the bathroom and running your credit card through.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We have to be, and when we're in our sessions, unfortunately we're sitting in a chair a lot.
Right.
Most of us, but we have to be, noticing with our bodies what's happening right now.
Yeah, continual body scan. I'll run down my body and just notice, ooh, I'm feeling anxious. Is this my anxiety or is this the client's? What's going on here? And continual, like you said, it was just like a renewal. I just imagine myself being connected to source above my head and at my feet, even if I'm sitting crisscross applesauce, which is the way I like to do therapy.
Exactly. Can I feel like, what are my shoulders doing? I'll find myself especially lately, I've been really feeling a lot of stress and I've been noticing my shoulders being hunched up. So I'm in my session and I'm sitting in the chair and I'm like, what's my body doing right now? And I notice that my shoulders are hunched. I go, oh, and I elongate the neck and just, lift from my crown and take a deep breath and feel my core and notice my hamstrings touching, my hamstring muscles touching the chair. And I'll just, tense and release them so I can remember that I'm in a body that's in this chair.
Grounding.
Push my feet on the floor. If I have, if I'm not sitting crisscross applesauce.
It's my favorite.
Yeah. But just even, elongating your spine and your crown, just really helps. And of course, it's always a reminder to check in with the client and say, are you noticing anything? Because I'm noticing that this is what my body's doing right now. And oftentimes that's when they've slipped out of their window of tolerance and into more of a dissociative or hyper-aroused state.
You're right.
And so, it's information.
And letting that be okay. I love that you're giving healing professionals permission to check in. It feels like a self-disclosure, even when we ask the question of them. It baffles me how many graduate programs in psychology still do not use that I-thou model of like, hey, check in with them.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're not a human and only they are.
Right? What the hell is that?
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem is I don't blame my program. It's partly the way I interpreted what was being said, which was a very simplistic way of understanding. And that's just where I was at the time. But to be able to stay in your highest self as much as possible, to stay grounded, but still be able to say, I'm noticing this. I'm noticing suddenly I just felt a headache suddenly. Are you noticing anything? It's intuitive, but it's like, it is what's really happening in the room. So to pretend it's not, I don't think that really serves anyone.
No, I just think we need to continue to allow for that humanistic meeting people where they're at approach, even just while recognizing that, okay, you can still be the expert in the room if that's your therapeutic orientation, while still remaining very here and now with your client.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're not sitting down crying and saying, I'm thinking about when my mom said, you're not, that's not what you should do.
You're losing your professionalism. No.
Right. But you're still saying, and one thing you can do as a therapist is you don't have to say, are you noticing anything? But you can say, you don't have to say, I'm noticing, but you can say, are you noticing anything in your belly
them
area?
To describe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And see if they're picking up on it. And you're like, oh, maybe that's just my lunch. Never mind.
I just love the idea of giving everyone, even those who aren't therapists. You're just walking in Walmart and, the day like big tragedies happen, 9/11, Paris bombings, you name it, whatever, giving yourself permission to reground moment by moment and not make yourself responsible for another's reactions or healing. You can be a space holder without taking it in.
Yeah. And then when it is yours, feel it and seek support from other people who it isn't happening to, so that they can, from their grounded place, they can support you.
Yeah, we don't need everybody in the mud pit. Somebody's got to be outside.
And we all have the times we're either in it or we're outside of it. So we'll all have our moment when we're going to need that support too.
Love it. Each one reach one.
Yeah.
Which brings me back to cycles again. It's so beautiful. The notion of sacred psychology of, we do all need each other. And when we show up with our authentic giftings, a yoga therapist also needs a yoga therapist, teacher, you know what I mean? And a dentist needs a dentist. So giving yourself permission to use such services when you need them.
Yeah, especially us as therapists.
Especially. Yes.
Yeah.
Compassion fatigue is real.
It is. And, I'm firmly of the belief that, and this comes from the Trauma Stewardship Institute as well, Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky, who is amazing. Basically, it's the idea that it's not if you will be affected by trauma exposure as a helping professional, it's when.
You're right.
Because you can't be there helping if you don't care. And because you care, seeing others suffer is going to take a toll on you. So let's get that whole idea that only the weak are, susceptible to burnout. Let's get that off the table and just recognize that we all are affected by trauma exposure, and it's the ones who are willing to be honest with themselves about that and take care of it on an ongoing basis who will thrive for the long term in our profession.
I love it. Laura, any parting words for someone who just really is wondering where to even begin with the overwhelm of trauma, something very difficult?
Well, there are a million resources out there for people to learn more about trauma. And so if you have experienced trauma and you want to understand more about that, I would say definitely reaching out to a skilled trauma therapist, someone who says explicitly that that's what they have specialized training in. And if it's an issue of vicarious trauma, that book, Trauma Stewardship, or the Trauma Stewardship Institute is an amazing website resource to get hope. But overall, for everyone, this it seems silly to say that there's like one thing that can help everyone, but it's really been true for me in my life that finding a self-compassion practice has been a total game changer for me. And so I love Kristen Neff's work. Selfcompassion.org is her website, and her book, Self-Compassion, is really, it's written for anyone, and it's very easy to understand and has real practices you can take away, as soon as you start reading. It's really great.
I am so glad that you mentioned that. That is one of my favorite things to point people to. Anything that gives you space to be you. You can't go wrong there.
Exactly. It's that idea that we're all human and we all suffer at times, but we don't have to pretend it's not happening. We have to take care of it when it's happening.
I love it. And I will put links to that in the show notes for sure. So speaking of show notes, where can people hang out with you? You have a podcast as well.
I do. My podcast is called Therapy Chat. So it's on all the, places that you find podcasts. And you can also find it at the website, therapychatpodcast.com. And anybody who's, looking for a therapist in my area and thinks that, what I do sounds right in Maryland, you can get to my therapy website through that same podcast, therapychatpodcast.com. You'll see links to work with me.
You are such a joy. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I loved it.
Thanks for listening to the Sacred Psychology Podcast. I pray you found some inspiration and empowerment to go out and make this life the most fulfilling possible. You can follow Sacred Psychology on Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Tag us on social media and let us know what you think as well. Please note that the information provided is not meant to convey professional, psychological, or medical advice. If you could use such services, I highly recommend seeking them out from someone you trust. To get in touch with me personally or to see how we might work together, please check out ariatherapy.com or talesfromatrapezoid.com. Until next time, everyone.